Hello, and welcome to the fifth episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we have been podcasting for over a month now.
That is correct.
I just said that.
Take two.
Yeah, take two. We need to start with a joke, don't we?
No.
No?
Do you have a joke?
You have a joke.
I don't have a joke.
You don't have a joke?
No, I've been working on a Greek and Macedonian and a pro-choice person walk into a bar.
You can't think of anything?
Well, I the next step in the joke, I can't come up with a punchline. So the Greek says, the ancient Greeks were great warriors and killed many people. And the Macedonian says, the Macedonians conquered all of Greece and all of the known world and killed tens of thousands of people. The pro-choice person says, the pro-choice people have murdered millions of babies and have accomplished nothing.
That's not a joke.
I know.
That's just really depressing. That's really awful.
I warned you it's not a joke. There's a joke somewhere in there, but I can't find it. It's lost.
I can tell.
I don't know what the joke is. I have a limit to my knowledge.
Speaking of limited knowledge, let's talk about epistemology.
Watch your mouth.
That's really bad. So epistemology is basically just the inquiry into what can be known and how we can know it. So it's a branch of philosophy focused purely on knowledge and what knowledge really is.
So what is knowledge and what can you know? What can you not know? Is it more important to know what you can know or what you cannot know?
Aren't they the same thing?
No. One is what you can know, one is what you cannot know.
Well, I feel like it's either or split.
No. It's like there's a few categories. First is what you know. Mm-hmm. Second is what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And then the knowledge of the known unknowns. And then there is the unknown unknowns.
I see.
Because you're in some ways you know what you don't know. There are a lot of subjects I know I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know a lot of medical terminology or treatment, but there's a lot of physics that I don't even know I don't know.
I guess that's true. I don't know which is more important. I feel like it's kind of useless to know what cannot be known, because then you're just like, okay, well, I know that, and there's nothing more that I can do with it. If you know what is known, then you can take the steps into making that known.
Right, but how do you know when you've reached your limit unless you know what is unknown?
Well, if you know the complete sum of everything that can be known, then you will eventually know everything that there is that you can know. Because you'll know when you hit the limit, because you know the limit.
Is there a limit?
Well, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's see what the pre-Socratics have to say.
I suppose there is a limit. There is the universe.
Yes.
Which has a limit, I would think,
yes,
of what exists. And so in that sense, you can only know what exists.
Yes.
Or maybe you'd have to know what existed, but no longer exists. Or maybe you'd have to also know what will exist, but has not yet come into being, in order to know everything.
You're a real epistemologist.
Watch your mouth.
All right, so we're going to start with pre-Socratic epistemology. And really the first guy that we talk about here is Parmenides, and he's the first philosopher to really distinguish between knowledge and belief. So before this, there really wasn't that much distinction between, what we can know and just what we believe.
He is the first known person to really discuss that, because there could have been other people that discussed it, just didn't write it down, right?
Yes.
It's important to know what you don't know.
Yes, that's very true. And so he really talks about that in his way of truth and way of seeming, and I think we mentioned that those were two of his, important works, and that's really all he ever did back in a previous episode. In the way of truth and the way of seeming, he was guided by like a goddess. He had some sort of hero set out on a journey, and she describes that there's a way of truth, which is knowledge, and there's a way of seeming, which is what humans see in the world, and that's not exactly knowledge. You look like you had something to add, but I guess
I didn't. It was a pregnant pause.
All right. Well, and then if there's nothing really else to say about Parmenides, there's Democritus, who of course is the atomist.
Watch your mouth.
You can't keep saying that. These are just Greek words.
Oh. It sounds like swear words.
Yeah, well, they can be, I guess, if you put enough emphasis behind them.
That's right.
And so Democritus really believed that atoms were really the only knowable truth in the universe. Or I don't even know if he says that they're knowable, but they are really the only truth in the universe. And really everything that we see around us is just our perception and belief of atoms and how they interact with each other. And so really everything goes back to his, everything is built of atoms, and we can't really know exactly what an atom is, but they are the only one true thing in the universe.
It's interesting, kind of like going off some sort of primary building block.
Yes.
Of all known things.
Like an atom.
Yes. Not ADAM.
No, unfortunately.
Yes. I wonder if there's any reason why the name Adam is similar to atom, being that Adam is the biblical first man.
I know that Adam in Hebrew really just means man or dirt, I think, depending on how it's used. So, I don't know, maybe there's some connection.
So I really named you Dirt.
Yes. My name is Mud.
Yeah, that's funny. You were quoting a song from Primus.
Yes.
I was actually thinking of a reference to Joe Dirt, who I think was that a David Spade character?
I don't know.
In a movie. Look it up.
Okay. Anyway.
Following Democritus was Protagoras.
Yes, Protagoras, something like that.
Protagoras.
Protagoras?
I think so, but maybe it's not. Maybe his friends called him Protagoras, but his enemies called him Protagoras. But he is of the opinion that man is the measure of all things.
Yes.
Do you think that's true in some ways?
I don't think so.
Who else would measure it?
I guess we do measure it, but we do not make it the inherent nature of all things. Like, we perceive everything, but that doesn't make it true, I guess.
Does it matter if man doesn't think it's true?
I don't know. There's got to be a universal constant somewhere. There has to be a truth.
Why?
Because.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That solves that. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, he's really kind of the founder of relativism. Protagoras is because he says that in the case of two conflicting beliefs, they are both true, but they are true for one person and true for the other person. And so we really can't find the truth. There is no really universal truth because everybody's perception of everything is different, and really everybody's perception is valid in its own way.
So he started that horrible philosophy of relativism. I'm thinking of a song. You say Protagoras, I say Protagoras. You say potato, I say no.
No, that's.
Well, in a way, it's kind of similar to his philosophy.
Mm-hmm. I guess it is.
If I believe that it's pronounced one thing, then I am right.
Yes.
But if somebody else believes the opposite, then they're right.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, like, all throughout this reading about relativism, it's just the exact same thing that's going on today with, like, speak your own truth, which I'm just kind of fundamentally opposed to that statement because you cannot have your own truth. There is the truth.
Why is that? Articulate it.
Because there has to be a universal constant for everything. Otherwise, there's nothing to strive for. There's nothing to, like, achieve, right? Because...
the answer, that's the wrong answer. The answer is, without a one basic fundamental truth, there is no truth.
Yes. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, you didn't get there fast enough.
I didn't get there fast. I was going to elaborate.
Yes. You have to be prepared for that because you're going to hit that in college that, it's my truth. It's that. No. And this is why.
Yes. Because
if we all have our own truth, there is no truth. You reductio ad absurdum.
Yes. Yes, reduced to the absurd. Yes.
I meant it as an insult.
Oh. No, if you put enough spite behind it, it'll work.
That is correct. Everything is better with a dash of spite.
Is that your worldview?
That is, yes. And it's also how I cook.
Right.
Got to put a little bit of spite in it.
Yes, that's lovely.
It's a seasoning.
I like that.
It's a universal season.
All right, and then we move on to the next section here, and that's about Socrates' knowledge and ignorance. And this is really what we can determine as kind of Socrates' view on knowledge and the whole relativism sort of deal. And so he really kind of says, like, knowledge of certain things is only unavailable for us, like at this particular time. So like to say that we don't know something doesn't mean that it is wholly unknowable. It is just unknowable for us right now. And he kind of says that like, just us Greeks in Athens right now, we don't know a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that they are completely unknowable. So it's kind of like going against relativism in a way, saying that, even if I don't see something, that doesn't mean that the truth isn't out there somewhere.
Right. That's kind of a quote from, what was that show? Oh, gosh darn it. From the 1980s. The truth is out there. You're not getting any reference, and I can't remember what it was.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Oh, they're about aliens and stuff.
Gotcha.
Golly. I'll think of it later. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Is that if there's a disagreement, it doesn't necessarily mean, or if you're saying it's not known, it doesn't mean it's not knowable.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, and he kind of says, he gives kind of a definition or a word for knowledge, and that's episteme, and that's this really kind of knowledge of a grand... You made a really weird face there. I know. You're about to say, watch your mouth. But yeah, episteme, which is this knowledge of a grand kind, and he kind of breaks that down, this knowledge of a grand kind, in that knowledge of the essence of something is the most important kind of knowledge, because he kind of drifts a little bit into relativism here, where we can look at different objects of like the same thing. Like if we look at beauty, for example, like we can look at a beautiful thing, but that is not the essence of beauty. And this kind of goes back to almost Plato's theory of ideas a little bit.
Right.
And it's more important to know not what is beautiful, but what beauty is itself, to get to the essence of things. And that's where the really important knowledge is.
I think it's important to come to an understanding that some people are wrong about beauty.
You've mentioned this to me before.
That opinions can be wrong,
yes,
objectively.
Yes.
And I can come up with some examples, but you don't seem interested. Okay, so moving along.
To the knowledge in the Theaetetus.
Watch your mouth!
You can't keep doing that. And this is kind of Plato's views on epistemology, because the Theaetetus was one of his works, in which it really kind of centers around what is knowledge, and it's really a conversation between this character and Socrates, this character Theaetetus, and he kind of goes around and he says that knowledge is really, it consists of things like geometry and astronomy on the one hand, and shoemaking and carpentry on the other. And this really doesn't please Socrates in the least, because he kind of just says, well, we can have knowledge of one thing or another thing, but that is not the whole sum of knowledge. That is just knowledge of a skill or knowledge of a specific particular subject. And this kind of goes back to like Socrates' own his own revelation that he knew nothing, because when he went around and he interviewed like all the townspeople and everything, he realized that, I don't know as much as this shoemaker does about making shoes, and the only really knowledge is that I know nothing.
That's what made him the most wise of all.
Yes.
It was kind of like at the Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. Even though he didn't have a heart, he was the most kindest person. And it was revealing that... Anyway, yes. I digress. But yeah, I mean, it was. I feel like I'm 2 rooms away from you with my sound. By the way, I think you've turned me down on purpose.
I haven't turned you down at all.
All right. Well, our viewer, listener,
or one viewer, yeah,
our one viewer,
yes,
we'll see how far away.
They'll see, yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna take a water.
I can turn you up.
Yeah, turn me up. The listeners are much happier now.
Are they?
Yes.
You can say that for a fact.
Yeah, I know it.
Okay.
That one listener. Because the one listener, you know who it is? It's me.
Yeah, I bet it is.
I'm going to download this thing tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden, I'll be like, oh, I sound so much better.
Yes. And so then Theaetetus kind of puts forth a different definition of knowledge, and that knowledge is perception. And you have to have knowledge kind of with perception in order to really know everything. And to this, Socrates says, well, no, because you can't have one without the other. He puts forth 2 examples here. Like, you can have perception without knowledge. Like, for example, if you hear somebody speaking a foreign language, you can perceive that foreign language, you can hear it, but you do not actually know what anybody is saying. And then he also says that there's knowledge without perception, too. And that you can imagine something, like I can close my eyes and think of a chair, and I can kind of see a chair in my mind's eye, and I know about that chair even without physically perceiving it in front of me. And so he kind of like goes against this idea of, we have to just completely rely on our senses to really know what knowledge is.
So if you spoke that made up language that J.R.R. Tolkien made up. If you spoke it to me, I could perceive it as a language, but I wouldn't know it.
Yes.
And so that would basically proved Socrates' point.
Yes. Thank you for tying that back into Tolkien. I appreciate it.
I have to have at least one reference, and I think I did a very good job on that one.
Yes, that was very good. And so then Socrates also kind of says that man is also just not the source of knowledge, so kind of going against what, was it Parmenides or Protagoras? Protagoras said that man...
Protagoras?
Protagoras, yes. Man is the measure of all things. He says that, man isn't the source of all knowledge because we don't know the future. And to have all knowledge, to be the source of knowledge, we would have to know the future. We'd have to know everything.
Do you really think do you think that you would agree with that? That you have to know the future to have all knowledge? I think last week you made the argument that...
Yes, and I want to talk about that at
that God would have to have that knowledge of the future.
Yes.
For him to be all-knowing.
Yes.
And so now you're hesitating.
Well, because I'm a human. I'm not God.
No, but I mean, well, obviously you can't have all knowledge because it won't fit in your brain. It'll pop, some of the old stuff will pop out. But
is that the scientific explanation?
That was Einstein's theory. That's why he I forget what the quote was, but he didn't like to learn like people's phone numbers and addresses because he could write that down. He thought if he filled up his brain with stuff that he could just look up, he wouldn't be able to focus his mind on other more pressing matters or important matters.
Interesting.
I agree with him.
Anyway, like you were saying, what were you saying?
I completely forgot.
It was about me saying about God.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. So the question is, do you need to know the future in order to know all things?
I think you do. Because the future is a thing. And to know everything, you have to know the future.
But the future doesn't exist yet.
Well,
I can know all things now.
Yes.
Well, does it exist for anyone?
It exists for God.
Now?
Yes.
How?
Oh, because I kind of went into this a little bit, and I kind of looked this up a little bit. With
did you?
I did just a little bit.
I cheated.
I mean, I don't know everything. I have to turn to other sources.
All right.
And we kind of.
I have a source, but you can't read it. It's Mark Bishop's Book of Knowledge.
God.
But go ahead.
So, God is kind of outside of time himself, in a way, because he's God. He's not bound to the rules of the universe, and so
why not?
Because I said so.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yes. And so, if you agree with that definition, that God is, not bound to the rules of the universe.
Are you asking me that?
Yes, I'm asking you.
I don't know the answer to that because he could, or God could. I don't want to call God a he. Yeah, especially in these times. But God could set up the universe in such a way that he is bound. I said it again. That God is bound by the rules that he sets up. Said it again.
But I don't think he did. I mean, I'm just kind of going off of the Catholic view of God because that's what I personally believe, and I know that's what you believe. So
do you?
Yes, I do. I do know that. And so we kind of know that God is kind of outside of the universe in a way, and to really kind of
Well, I think maybe a better way to look at this is that time itself is a physical concept.
Yes.
And so it because it is relative to speed and mass and all that kind of stuff. So since it's a physical concept, God, a non-physical being, would not be bound by time.
Yes.
But the argument is, well, then he's not. God's not bound by time. Then God can be in the future, in the past, and the present, all at the same time. But my argument against that is that the future does not yet exist.
Well, it does if you're outside of time. If you're outside of time and time has no bearing on you, there is no past, present, or future. There just is.
Why is there not past, present, and future just because it doesn't affect you?
Well, if it doesn't affect you, then why would it matter at all?
It would just be being.
Yes. And that is what God is. God is just being.
Correct. So how can God know the future when the future hasn't happened yet? It doesn't exist anywhere. It hasn't
happened to us.
It hasn't happened to anyone. It hasn't happened. It's in the future. It hasn't. It doesn't exist yet.
It exists for God.
How? It hasn't happened.
Because he's outside of time.
So
So that if we could say that the past doesn't matter for God, so why should the future matter for God?
The past has already happened. God knows it.
For us.
For God.
But we've just agreed that God is outside of time.
That's
if
correct.
he's outside of time and he's not bound by time, then why is there a past, present, and future at all for him? He is infinite. So if he's infinite, there is no past, present, or future. Nothing is relative to him.
I understand that.
Yes.
But how would those things exist when they haven't happened yet? For anybody, whether they're in time or out of time. They haven't happened yet.
Well, because
they don't exist.
You keep saying yet, but if you're outside of time, nothing is yet. And everything is yet because you're outside of time and nothing is relative to you.
When do things come into existence?
At the very beginning.
At what point? So whatever is going to happen tomorrow
yes.
existed at the beginning of time.
Not for us.
For anyone.
No.
For anything or
no,
any being.
Not if you're outside of time.
It exists for them or God. It existed for God.
Yes.
Before the beginning of time.
Perhaps.
Perhaps yes or no?
Well, I don't know.
Perhaps.
Well, because it's God and we've already agreed that he's outside of time. Right? So if we agree that he's outside of time.
Okay, how about this? So when we die.
Yes.
We are outside of time.
Yes, because when we go to heaven, heaven is just being with God for eternity. And so if we kind of place...
We'll be outside of time.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So will we know all those things that will happen in the future?
Probably. I don't see why not.
Well, who would give us access to that knowledge?
Well, God.
Why? And how?
Well, because heaven is just eternal being with God. And if we're with God, we receive all of his gifts, basically. I'm kind of just going off like the Catholic teaching here.
All of his gifts? We're omniscient and omnipotent?
In a way, I would say. Because, once we're removed from time, we can kind of just look out onto what is time.
I have an interesting argument.
I kind of like to just say so. Because,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, because when we're in heaven, heaven is eternity with God. And so we cannot say that there is a specific moment that we enter heaven. Because in order to say that there's a specific moment that we enter heaven, that is to say that we kind of deny this idea of eternity. Because if something has a beginning, it's not really eternal. So it has to be forever and it has to be outside of time. And so really, because that's kind of like the whole idea that, God is eternal. He has no beginning and he has no end. He just always was. He always was a being. And so when we die, we kind of enter into that being and we enter into that eternal, loop. But there's no specific point in which we enter into that loop in time because it is just removed from time itself because it is in and of itself eternal. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. I think it suffers from a certain... repetitive definition,
Yes.
Like you're defining it as itself.
Yes.
And so it tends to lose a certain amount of meaning. I understand what you're saying. Interesting thoughts. Now, how about this for an interesting thought?
Mm-hmm.
So Adam and Eve,
mm-hmm.
first man and woman, or there was a first man and woman, whether you believe in the Bible or not. There had been some human in our current form that is basically the first. And we have souls, right?
Yes.
When we die, we're outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
What if Adam and Eve were reincarnated? Like all we had were two souls, two human souls that one of them, when they died, they got reincarnated as their children because they're outside of time, so they could exist at the same time as Adam and Eve. And therefore, those souls just kept replicating until we have billions of them overlapping currently, living out their lives.
So we're all just have the soul of Adam and Eve?
Yes.
So you're just asking me what I think about that? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What do you think of that idea?
I think that's really depressing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, it kind of even goes back to the ancient Greeks about what our soul really is, and it's really what makes us unique. And I think to deny us of that uniqueness in our soul is to deny us of being human, really. Because I don't want to be Adam or Eve. I want to be my own soul. And I think, as humans, we are given our own soul. We are given the freedom to make our own choices, and we're not bound up in somebody else's soul. My soul is mine and mine alone.
I thought it was interesting that Plato kind of came back to some sort of reincarnation theory about remembering past better lives or something.
Yeah.
And so that reincarnation thing interests me in how it's administered.
Yes.
Because I think theoretically, if souls can be reincarnated, there would be nothing to stop only having one soul.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually you could have Adam live his lifetime, be reincarnated back in time, because time's not, the souls are not physical, for Eve. So it could be one soul.
Yes.
Just replicated over and over and over again.
I don't like that.
I don't either.
Okay.
I'm not advocating for it. I just think that's interesting.
Just what are my thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Well, I think really, I wanted to kind of bring it back to the original discussion we had
sorry.
over whether or not back to the book, but back to whether or not, an eternal all-knowing God gives us free will or not. And I think it does.
We're back to yesterday's
We're back
thing.
to that.
You didn't like
last
that.
week.
You didn't like how we left that off.
No, I didn't. That's the topic I wanted to get back into. And I
Okay.
think we do still have free will for all of the reasons I just listed, because God is himself eternal and outside of time. And so without that relevance to God, there's nothing before and after in relation to God. We do have free will because he does not look at us right now in the present, in a way. He just looks at us as we are and always have been, because, he is outside of time. And so there is no past or future for our actions to him.
I guess it all happened like that. Actually, quicker than that for him.
Yeah, I think so. I could agree with that.
So like we're thinking like God's sitting back, waiting for all this stuff to happen. Man, that's a long time to wait. But he's not waiting. It all has already happened.
Or maybe he's forever waiting.
Or he's not waiting at all.
Yeah.
Boom.
Well, because he's outside of time. Why should
That's
there
right.
be? Yeah.
There's no time.
That's what I'm saying.
He's everywhere and anywhere and nowhere at all.
So do you agree with me?
What?
That, having an infinitely knowledgeable God who is outside of time permits us to have free will.
Yes, it does permit it. I also don't think I believe that God knows what we haven't done yet.
So how does that work with my idea of an infinitely knowledgeable God?
Because he has infinite knowledge of what exists.
But everything...
We are creating our reality by our choices as we go forward. And the reality only exists through the passage of time. And so he can't know what does not exist.
But he's outside of time. The passage of time is irrelevant to him.
Yes, but those things are not yet created, whether it's in time or outside of time. They come into being when they happen, in time. And they don't yet exist until we do them, or don't do them.
I see what you mean.
And so they're not knowable. Whether he's into, I don't think you can go. I think you could. I don't think, in that respect, you can go forward in time. Like have a time machine and go in the future. I think God knows everything that has already occurred, because it has already happened.
Yes.
And he was essentially there for it. But he can't be there for what happens tomorrow, because not till tomorrow, even if he's outside of time. I can't contemplate having a being know what we've already chosen to do, but we have not already chosen to do, because I think it's too complicated to allow free will when your choices have already been determined, essentially, before you did them. I have a problem with that.
Yes.
And I'm probably not articulating it very persuasively, but that's my fundamental problem with God knowing the future.
I see what you mean.
That doesn't mean that you agree.
I don't agree.
Interesting. Well, we're going to agree to disagree, and we also understand that there are limits to our knowledge.
Yes.
One day, in the future, we will know who is right. Unless God limits our knowledge after we die.
I guess that's true.
Because if you're right, we will know everything, including whether or not you're right tonight or I was right. I think that we could die, go to heaven, such as it is, because you won't go anywhere, I guess, because it's outside of location.
Yes.
And we may never know because maybe our knowledge is limited at that point, even though we are with God. Are we going to know everything? Am I going to know everybody's deepest, darkest secrets when I go to heaven? Am I going to know all their sins?
I don't know about that.
Why wouldn't I? Who's going to limit it?
Well, really the two, main principles of God are his intellect and his free will. And those are like the principles that were kind of given to us as we are in the image of God. So we kind of have almost a smaller version of his intellect and free will, but it's made in that same image. And so God has infinite intellect and free will. And while we have, I don't want to say limited free will, because we can do what we want, we can make our own choices, but we do certainly have limited intellect. There is a limit on what we can know.
Agreed.
And I think to an extent we are limited, like you say, by time almost in our free will, in that, we cannot just go into the past, if we want to. We cannot go into the future if we want to, but we can make choices right now in the present. And I think that's the difference between God, because God's free will is infinite in that he can make decisions both in the past and in the present and in the future because he's outside of time.
Do you think he takes an active role in our lives?
Depends on how you want to define active.
Any role at all?
I think so.
How so?
Well,
does he put the fingers on the scales at all? Other than, Jesus coming and giving us the message, and that basically creates the responsibility for us to either do the right thing or do the wrong thing, basically.
Yes.
That's the way I view it. So then after that, do you think he answers prayers? Do you think he protects certain people? Do you think he punishes people while they're still alive? Do you think he prevents bad things from happening? And if he does those things, doesn't he have moral responsibility for failing to protect others?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah. Maybe that'll be for the next time.
Maybe.
Or a future discussion. I don't know if that...
You'll have to write down all the parts of that for me. That's a long question.
It's all the same concept of God's involvement in our lives and his responsibility should he become involved, if any.
I'll keep that in mind for next time.
Yeah, or a future podcast.
Yeah. Wow.
Those are deep thoughts, man.
Those are deep thoughts. Yeah. Back to Socrates. I was kind of talking about perception. I talked about why, perception isn't equal to knowledge. And so then Theaetetus puts forth, one last definition of knowledge, and that is knowledge is itself thought. And then Socrates kind of shoots that down because, we can think thoughts about something, but they, can be not true and they don't equate to full knowledge. Even if we do have a true thought about something, that is not full knowledge of that something.
Yes, could just be a partial concept of some sort, even though we have that in our mind. Yeah, they seem to, and I think it when you go through these, I'm kind of having flashbacks of my old philosophy classes where they seem to have they get bogged down on the language side of it, but the author Mr. Kenny kind of goes into that, with their definitions of knowledge and in ancient Greek texts. I think that they're arguing over how they say stuff and how they perceive it as opposed to really getting somewhere with it. But yeah, it's interesting. And then but I think his views also have some holes in them too. And so it's an interesting discussion in a fundamental way. And then we kind of talked about more modern concepts about limits of knowledge and God and with regard to time and that sort of thing. But
yes,
looking for some sort of comment in response to that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know what else to say. I feel like we kind of exhausted that topic a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really tired.
I know.
I've exhausted that topic.
Knowledge and ideas. More Plato. And Plato
Are
really...
we past that?
No, never knowledge and ideas.
I'm on the last page, man. Where are you at?
All right. Well, Plato kind of goes really, really kind of pretentious here, saying that, those who are non-philosophers only live in appearance and the philosophers are the only ones who are able to live in truth and the only ones who are able to know truth, because that's what we're trying to find. And he kind of puts forth this idea that knowledge and thought are powers, just as, we kind of have like other sort of virtues, and kind of knowledge and thought are two of those.
Well, in his defense, true knowledge, as it has meaning in philosophy, is more important than other fields of study.
Yes.
So that's why I view it. So do you want to go into the skeptics and all that kind of, or whatever, skepticism and all that?
I feel like we should touch on Aristotle.
All right, why don't you touch him? Why don't you touch on Aristotle? Come on, let's blow through these guys.
All right. Well, Aristotle, he kind of differentiates between what is science and what is knowledge, and he kind of we talked about his scientific method before, and right. He talks about how scientists or mathematicians kind of think about a hypothesis and they kind of assume it to be true and then make conclusions leading up to that hypothesis, and that philosophers don't do that same thing. They have to defend each hypothesis right. Until they reach a universal truth.
Yeah, they get bogged down in that. And I think the one thing that they're really missing is being able to reproduce something. Through scientific study and examination. I think that's really what the one thing that's missing. Okay, how do I establish truth? Is what I think or what I perceive. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you can replicate in using the same standards through a scientific experiment. Yes. Of course, they haven't got there yet because they're ancient Greeks.
And he kind of also says that we cannot treat majority opinion as truth, which I really like that kind of sentiment because, we don't know everything. And if the majority of people agree with something, that does not guarantee it as the right thing or the true thing.
Oh, God knows that.
And he kind of goes into he goes into the senses and how our senses can be wrong. But there is a perfect part of our senses, and that our senses are the foundation of truth in a way, even though they can be flawed. And he kind of puts that in a way of saying that even if, I say something is red, from a distance it does look red. And then in getting closer and closer and examining it, it actually looks blue. We only achieved that through our senses. So in a way, they're both fallible and infallible, in that they are fallible and that we can perceive things incorrectly, but it's only through further perception through that same sense that we do realize our faults, and that is what makes them infallible in a way, and that they are the only judge of their respective object.
Well put.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, next,
Epicurean epistemology.
I always think of food when I think of Epicurean.
Epicurean? Why?
I don't know. They're very good cooks.
There's not too much to touch on with the Epicureans.
Pretty much similar, sensation is a foundation of knowledge for Epicureans.
Yeah, and Epicurus, I really think the only really thing of note with him is that he was the first one to really define epistemology as a separate branch of philosophy. Before this, it was just kind of accepted that epistemology was almost like philosophy itself, and he really sets it apart as its own sort of thing.
Yeah, I like this quote. We must distinguish sharply between a sense impression and an accompanying but distinct belief.
Yes.
Like a conclusions or belief about it is different than what the senses or the scientific study more accurately would show.
Yes.
Right?
And then the Stoics kind of put forth this really good, I think, representation of how we come to knowledge, in that we kind of it's kind of like a cycle, in that we experience things with our senses, and those experiences become memories, and then we use those memories to create new experiences. And just over time, they kind of put it like our brain, as we're first born, is a blank sheet of paper, and over time we just keep building these new concepts in our brain until eventually, we kind of do realize, what is knowledge and what is true about a lot of things throughout our life. And I just really like that idea of that, the longer we're alive, the longer and more likely we're able to, find the truth.
That's interesting.
Also
a lot of people think the opposite. Is that you get older, you get further away from the truth because you're less innocent.
Yes, I guess that's
more jaded or jaundiced view of the world.
But you do have more knowledge. I don't think there's any denying that.
I don't know that that's true, because it goes back to my Einstein theory. All my new knowledge dropped out the other knowledge. I may only have a finite amount of information I can hold in this cranium. Because I don't remember any calculus.
And the Stoics kind of really, they set this, I think, really good look at what is, different between knowledge and belief, and they use cognition in between those two. And so knowledge is always true, and it never changes. And belief is not always true, and it is very liable to change. So that's kind of like what we perceive based on our senses. And then cognition kind of sits right in between those two, in that our cognition is based on our beliefs, but it is, we found it to be true, but it is still liable to change over time. So that's kind of like how we use individual beliefs that we know to be true and kind of form those to form our full knowledge and understanding of everything. I just kind of really like that idea of separating those types of knowledge and belief.
That's right. There is knowledge and there's opinion.
Yes.
That's pretty much what they're saying.
And cognition is in between those two.
I thought the cognition was what you turn to get the car started.
That's the ignition.
Oh, ignition.
Yes. It's really awful.
Academic skepticism. Are we there yet?
I think we can move on to academic skepticism.
And they said, among other things, there could be no infallible impressions.
I hate the skeptics.
Really? Why?
It's really kind of just an awful idea to have, just a really awful way to look at the world.
Nothing is knowable.
Nothing is knowable, and that, everything we do is flawed, basically. And I just it kind of sets like this kind of idea of, what's the point in even trying, right? What's the point in even trying to find knowledge if we know that, most everything is unknowable to every degree? So it's like, well,
I imagine them just laying about, doing nothing, not working. What is work? Why bother? I can't even know anything or do anything.
Yes.
I kind of enjoy that about them, though.
I don't.
At least they have a purity of philosophy, where they just, it's so pure because there's nothing corrupting about it. They just say everything is not knowable. Mm-hmm. It kind of calls to me.
I really hate, yeah. I really hate their idea that the most radical of the skeptics, they believe, that even we shouldn't even form beliefs about anything because we just know so little. Don't even form a belief about anything. And so then we kind of get like this idea.
Why bother, man? Why bother?
It's so depressing. It's so awful.
Well, you keep saying it's awful, but you're not saying why. Why is it so bad? They could be right. What does it matter? You don't know.
Well, there's always the possibility that you can. And I think just to deny that possibility is just robbing you of any chance to live a happy life.
Well, except for you'll just stop wasting your time trying to figure it out.
There's always the chance that's not a waste of time. They never actually prove that anything is not worth knowing. They just kind of keep saying that, nothing is worth knowing, and they never really prove that.
Can you prove that?
I can prove that there's always a chance that something is worth knowing. And I think they keep definitively saying that there's no chance that anything is worth knowing. And I think to rob people of that chance to pursue knowledge and pursue the truth is just a terrible sentiment to have.
Wow, that's pretty harsh.
Yeah. I just really hate. They always kind of they put all of their reasoning on impulse, and they kind of say like, well, if you're a skeptic, how do you know that you're actually getting into a bathtub and not an impossible void? And, they say, well, I just fell victim to my bath getting into impulse.
That's right.
That's just really miserable. Just, that it's a bath. There's no point in saying, I just have a bath getting into impulse.
Well, it is very similar to a bath, certainly. How do you know it's a bath?
Well, because I can
How do you
see
know
it.
It's water?
Yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like it's like a lot of like a poser, some sophisticate in college who smokes too much dope. Say, oh, you don't know, you can't know anything.
It's like Socrates to an annoying level.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's just another assumption.
I'm more knowledgeable than you
because I know that I don't know anything. Because I'm so stupid, I don't know anything, and so now I'm wise. Yeah. The Delphi said I was. The Oracle of Delphi said I was the wisest in all, and I proved it. You know how I proved it? Because I'm the dumbest. But at least I know I'm the dumbest. I'm Socrates.
Yeah, because they kind of just keep saying that everybody else is a fraud, right? Because if you say that you know nothing, if you say that you know something, the skeptics are immediately going to say, well, no, you don't. No, you don't. You can't prove that you know everything. I just think that's a really awful thing to do to yourself and to other people, because then you're denying people of their ability to know anything. And you're also denying yourself of any reason to try to know anything. And I
find them endlessly entertaining.
I think they'd be very they're entertaining from a distance. I feel like the minute you meet a true skeptic who keeps saying that you know nothing, you're gonna want to hurt that person.
Well, it'd be a good one to be an articulate skeptic, because they can always make an argument that there's something else that you don't know about it. So you don't really know it, that
just get frustrating. Like imagine, you're a lawyer, so you spent years of your life studying the law, And so imagine some dude comes up to you and says, well, you don't know everything about the law because you don't know this one bylaw in Wisconsin, so you're not a real lawyer. You don't know anything.
Dude, I can't tell you how many times something like that has happened. Happens all the time. Yeah, the amateur lawyers. Yeah, so that's a bad thing. That doesn't ring true to me because I hear it all the time. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, bite me.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's my opinion
right.
of the skeptics.
Right.
I hate the skeptics.
Well, I'm with you. Let's hate on people.
I think they're the most useless type of philosopher, the skeptics.
I think that you have dashed a lot of spite into this podcast.
I have.
And I applaud you for that.
Thank you. I feel like
I think we've come to the knowledge that you do not like skeptics.
Yes, I think we could agree. Well, do you know that? Do you know that? I don't think you know that.
I know it.
No, you don't.
Okay.
How do you know?
Okay. All right. We know that, and we also know that you're very intent on proving that God knows the future, and somehow you still have free will, even though He knows what you've already chosen.
Should we end the episode, or do you want more remarks on that?
No, because we're gonna have this is gonna be an endless topic of discussion for the rest of these podcasts. Because you are going to keep trying.
We'll have to get like a little theme song to play every time I want to talk about
time and how it affects
time and
God.
Yeah.
I have the theme song right here.
Oh.
That plays in my head every time you start talking about it. No, I'm just joking. Just mocking you.
That's lovely.
I don't know why you don't like the skeptics. All right, I think we're done with epistemology.
Yes, that was chapter 4.
Yes, of how many?
Of a lot.
Yeah, we have.
Well, there's 4 books in this one big book, so
That's true.
we're like 130 pages in, and there's like 1,000 pages, so we might be about 10% of the way in.
All right,
So maybe we're looking at like 50 total episodes here.
Well, I think we're going to start doubling up soon.
I don't like that.
All right, then we won't double up soon.
Yes.
But at some point, you're going away to college. I guess we can do it remotely.
Yes.
But if we're doing one chapter a week,
Yes.
how many weeks do we have left? I mean,
Probably about 45.
well, that's going to carry
Almost
us
a year,
into
yeah.
next. Well, you're going to be going away to college, so we'll have to consider.
Yes.
We could do it remotely, though. We can do it.
We could figure it out.
by Zoom.
Yes. That's something for all the viewers to listen to.
Zoom
look forward to.
Loom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do a video podcast. Anyway,
We could. Anyway, I think it's time to wrap up this episode.
agreed.
Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I am and will forever be Mark Bishop.
It's a good sentiment to have. It's exactly what God is, too. He always has been and always will be. He's outside of time.
Are you calling me godlike?
No,
What?
I am not.
We're all godlike. You said it earlier in this podcast.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But you are not God.
Hey, man,
Definitively.
I was created in His image.
Mm-hmm. And you know nothing. So you're smarter than me.
Well, if I know nothing, I'm in His image. What are you saying about God? I think you just insulted God.
Maybe so. We'll find out. Or maybe we won't, depending on who you ask.